Good morning, everyone. Today's lesson is about the stringed instruments. We're going to talk about their different sounds, how they have evolved from when they started, and what they look like around the world. Okay? We're going to start with instruments that we should all be familiar with by now. That's the orchestral strings. The most common ones that we have seen so far are the violin, the viola, the cello, and the double bass. If we look at the size of these instruments, we'll notice that they all look the same, but one is larger than the other. The violin is the smallest, which makes it the highest pitch. The double bass is the largest, which makes it the lowest pitch. The cello is the second largest, right? So it's not as large as the double bass, but it also plays bass notes. And the viola is a little bit smaller than the violin, but yet still smaller than the cello. So it plays something that we call middle voices. These voices or instrumental parts essentially fill out a chord between the violin notes and the cello and bass notes. The orchestral string instruments are acoustic and have been this way since about 1600. Okay? The term acoustic means these instruments do not use electricity to amplify their sound. They have a hollow body, and the hollow body amplifies the vibration of the string. The violin, viola, cello, and double bass use a bow, and when they are played, it is called bowing. So when a string is crossed with a bow, that vibration is sent through the body of the instrument and amplified and projected through the F holes. So these are F holes right here on the bass. They're called F holes because they're shaped like the letter F. Bows are made out of wood and horsehair. And in order to keep the horsehair taut, you need to adjust it by this screw down here and rub something called rosin on it. Rosin is essentially like tree resin or some kind of sap that helps coat the strings that helps coat the horsehair to grab the strings the best. So this is the way the instruments are played in orchestra. There's also a way you can play this for a lower dynamic with your fingers, which is called pizzicato. And please listen to the canon in D. Another kind of orchestral string instrument is a harp. There's two versions of a harp. There's a lever harp, which is on the right, and a pedal harp, which is on the left. You'll notice that the pedal harp is quite larger than the lever harp. The lever harps have about anywhere between 14 and 90 strings, depending on the size, so they can get kind of small to rather large, but still you can hold the most of them. The pedal harp has 46 strings and uses pedals to manipulate the tunings of the strings. So the person to our left over here with their feet, you'll see they're pressing pedals, and that'll change little mechanisms up here to change the key of the whole instrument. Where on the lever harp, the player has the ability to change them by hand up here, and there are no pedals, and it is lighter. Pedal harps are very large, and they actually kind of look like the inside of what a piano is. So check out the different kinds of harps. Here's a version of Fur Elise on the lever harp, and then here's a cover of a Zelda song. And the reason why I chose this is the woman playing I actually went to college with, so I thought that would be fun for you. We're going to take a little step back in time and look at medieval instruments. These medieval stringed instruments, the most typical ones were lutes. They had anywhere between 6 and 14 strings and were made of wood. They also produce sound acoustically, and they are the predecessor of the violin and even the modern guitar. These lutes were used in many different cultures, and depending on the culture, depended on the amount of strings. You can watch some lute music here, and here's a little painting from the Renaissance era. Fast forward 200 years, the guitarra latina was made. This is the predecessor to the guitar. This has 4 strings, however, and is strummed by hand or plectrum, and also was invented in the early 1600s in Spain. The oud is a very old instrument and is very popular in Middle Eastern cultures. The oud and the lute have a very long history. I mean, these instruments are figured to be used from about 300 BC and are still used today. The oud has 11 strings and is used with a plectrum. You can watch an oud concert here to listen to how they sound. So now we're going to look at some more recent instruments. These are guitars, okay? The first electric guitar was invented in 1931 in the United States. This is the first electric guitar. This one you were able to play on your lap, and you were able to use something called a slide on your left hand, which looked like a bottleneck, and you just slid it up and down the neck and used a pick in your right hand. The 2 first electric guitar makers were George Beauchamp and Adolf Rickenbacker. Rickenbacker is one of the oldest guitar companies that are around today. In 1952, Ted McCarthy made the company Gibson, and that was the first electric guitar with a solid body. So the Rickenbackers had something called the semi-hollow body, which was basically a instrument that had mostly solid, but then a couple of holes in it. And they stuck with the classical tradition, and they used those F-shaped holes. If we look over at our right side of the screen, we're going to learn about 2 types of acoustic guitars. The top one is a classical acoustic guitar, which features nylon strings and was first developed in Spain by Antonio de Torres in the 19th century. The classical guitar also became known as the Spanish guitar for the reason of it was created in Spain. And you can check out a video on some Spanish guitar by clicking this link. And then the bottom picture is what the modern acoustic guitar looks like. You'll see this in a lot of American music, and it started being built here in America in the late 19th century. The difference is that the strings are steel, and they offer a more vibrant sound than the acoustic nylon string guitar. This last slide here is about different types of modern electric guitars and basses. So you can see how much they have changed, right? The modern day guitars and basses can be electric or acoustic. Guitars typically have 6 strings, but do exist in 7, 8, and 12 string varieties if you're listening to like either really interesting jazz or really, really heavy metal. These are featured there. Guitar basses typically have 4 strings, but similarly do have larger varieties in 4, 5, 6, 8, even 7 string basses I've seen. Once again, these are for like specialized people. They're not typical of the canon, right? Meaning they're not what you would see in the store or not what a beginner would want to play. Because it takes extended technique, meaning like you have to learn how to play the instrument, and then you have to learn how to deal with something new about the instrument. Guitars are played with a pick, and basses are typically played with the fingers. So this is a pick, and this is the posture for bass fingers. When we're talking about a plectrum before, plectrums kind of look like a pick, but might be longer and thinner. Both of these instruments have metal bars that go across the neck called frets. Frets help divide the neck into boxes where the pitches lie. So I left us some Eddie Van Halen guitar soloing. He just passed, but he is an amazing guitar player, so check him out. And then Victor Wooten is an amazing bass player. So these are some virtuosic players you can listen to if you want to see some really good examples of modern playing. And then as we move forward, we're going to look a little bit more at the Middle Eastern, Indian, and Arabic cultures. They have different types of string instruments as well. The Eastern tonal system is different than what is used in the Western tradition, which may create the need for additional strings, frets, and tunings. Some of these strings instruments are played with the fingers, while others require the instrument to use plectrums, which are right here, or a bow. So you can have either a pick type thing or a bow for either one of these instruments. Here's your plectrum. Here's a variety of different instruments. This is a zither, which is kind of close to what that first guitar looked like. You can pluck these strings. Here are also different kind of zithers. Here are some bowed instruments. Here's a sitar. These are fretted instruments that are used, you use your fingers or a plectrum. This is a saz. You can use a plectrum or your fingers to play that. You can check out this concert, and it features a large amount of these instruments. And it's a really cool sound too. Eastern string instruments uses something called microtones. So that's why their stringed instruments look so different and have so many different strings and frets. And along with that too, as we travel further east, we can see in Asia, we find stringed instruments similar to the Middle East. These instruments can be plucked by your finger or bowed, again, and they come in different shapes. So if we look to the picture at the right, you see we have the erhu, which is a bowed instrument. But the ruan looked like it can be plucked with your fingers, right? So there's the different kinds of things. This is an Asian zither. You can watch an example of some of their music. I believe it's called a guzheng. And an interesting thing that we learn about Eastern music is their scale choices are a bit different than ours. So they use a 5-tone system. Asian music uses distinct sounds due to the use of the pentatonic scales, along with their unique sounding instruments. Pentatonic refers to a type of scale that only uses 5 pitches. So when we say pentatonic scale, that's a scale that means a scale or an organization of pitches with only 5 notes. Okay? So here is just some like a zither concert, and then here's an even more descriptive video of these Asian instruments. I suggest you watch it as I don't know the instruments as well as the person talking about it here. All right, so that's our slideshow today, and you're going to just use that information to answer this. Please don't forget your name. Make sure you fill out these as well, the grade level and Google Classroom. It helps me figure out where you are, who you are when I'm doing grading, and I won't have errors in my grade book. Here's a question. When I give you a question that says, check all that apply, don't check every box because that shows me that you're just guessing. There's only 3 correct answers here. So any answer above the 3 correct ones, I'm not going to count. Here we go. Simple, straightforward question. Here you need to organize the instruments by how they have sound, by the types of pitches they make. Define acoustic, define pentatonic. What culture uses pentatonic primarily? Little questions about world string instruments, classical instruments, and then finally, I want you to choose a culture, and I want you to look at some of their music, and I want you to talk to me about it using your best musical vocabulary. And then finally, provide a link. I'm going to talk real quick about this area of the forms. A lot of people have not really been giving me information here. I appreciate those who have given me well thought out answers, and I will release a rubric for these types of questions so you can understand how I'm grading you. All right, so please give your most thoughtful responses. You can't be wrong on an opinion, but you can put effort into it, or you cannot put effort into it. So I'm going to try and grade you based on your effort. I enjoy reading these responses. It's how I get to know you a little bit better. All right, everyone. I hope you have a great week, and peace and love. Be well.